De'Aaron Fox wants out of Sacramento, and the Kings are exploring trade talks with multiple teams, but reporting suggests that he has one specific team in mind ahead of the trade deadline. I've gone through a bunch of different trades in a different video, but all the reporting seems to suggest that the team at the top of De'Aaron Fox's wish list is the San Antonio Spurs to play alongside Victor Wembanyama. The Wemby stuff has been brewing in San Antonio for the last couple of months. Guys are recognizing around the league how incredible he's going to be, how he's likely to be the face of the league over the next couple of seasons. His two-way impact, he's not someone that is necessarily going to take over offensively. So if you're a perimeter player, being able to play alongside Wemby is ideal. And there are definitely guys around the league that are telling their agents, hey, I'd like to get to San Antonio and play alongside that guy. And De'Aaron Fox is already doing that. He's in a unique position to be able to do it because of the way that his contract works. He's a 2026 free agent, which means that he can essentially steer himself to whichever team he likes to go to, given that he can just tell the other teams around the league, just like Sacramento, I'm not signing an extension with you, so I still reserve the right to leave your team for nothing in free agency in 2026. And obviously San Antonio is a team that he would go ahead and sign an extension with when it comes time to do so. So Fox is in a unique position here to go and make this happen and be the guy to pair himself alongside Wemby. And despite the fact that this sucks for Kings fans, I think it's really cool that he's looking at this from a basketball perspective. Typically, when we have trade requests like this and guys come up with a list of where they like to go, it's a bunch of bigger market teams, or it's a situation like Bradley Beal wanting to go to Phoenix or Jimmy Butler wanting to go to Phoenix, where it's just they've got some guys they want to play with, even if it's not necessarily like a top-tier contender. De'Aaron Fox is looking at the situation around the league and saying, okay, I don't need to go to Miami, I don't need to go to LA, I don't need to go to New York, but I could go and play alongside the guy that's probably going to be the best player in the league in 2 years. And that, to me, is just an interesting take on trade requests, despite the fact that it does suck for Kings fans. Now, Fox as the lead guard in San Antonio does make a ton of sense the way their roster is currently constructed, because even though Devin Vassell is very good, he's more of a wing scorer type. Steph Castle still has a lot of time to develop. They don't have a lead guard perimeter scorer they can hand the ball to at the end of games and say, go ahead and create for us in this pick and roll action with Victor Wembanyama. And adding De'Aaron Fox to their team certainly would provide them a huge boost offensively and would make Wemby potentially even more efficient. That would be a super interesting pairing to see there in San Antonio. Fox mostly fits along the same timeline as he is still in his prime, and I personally would love to see this happen. Fox and Wemby together in San Antonio, and the Spurs absolutely have the pieces to make this deal work depending on what Sacramento wants, and it seems like they're in active discussions on trying to work out a trade. I've talked before about a trade package that would include basically contracts and picks, no young player assets going back to Sacramento, but the Spurs have a bunch of future firsts that are not their own so that they can trade some of these picks. Sacramento can get value, and then they can still have access to their own picks to continue to build their team around Wemby and presumably Fox. There are some other contracts on the Spurs that could work here. Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes, namely, are the two guys at the top of the list I've seen mentioned a lot. But if I'm the Spurs, I'd rather keep CP3 and Harrison Barnes with this new construction of the team, and I'd be okay getting rid of someone like Keldon Johnson, Zach Collins, and a bunch of first-round picks. It could be even more than the 4 picks that I have listed here in the trade, whatever it takes to get De'Aaron Fox. Now, if you want to go beyond that, if Sacramento wants to push the envelope a little bit here and ask for more stuff in exchange, it's probably going to have to be some kind of young player asset, and to me, that's where the Spurs fall a little bit short. Sochan is a nice young player. I'm not giving up Devin Vassell, and I'm not giving up Steph Castle right now already into his rookie season for De'Aaron Fox. That doesn't mean that I don't think very highly of De'Aaron Fox. He's an awesome player, but I'm keeping those guys if I'm San Antonio. This is not going to be the first time that someone tries to get themselves to the Spurs to play with Wemby, whether it be via free agency or via trade. I'm not willing to give up Steph Castle or Devin Vassell in this kind of trade package when I have so many other assets to trade to Sacramento, and I know that he wants to be there anyway. So if I really needed to, I could wait till 2026 free agency if he really doesn't like the other trade options out there for himself. I personally am of the belief that there are ways to get this trade done if you're San Antonio that does not involve Devin Vassell or Steph Castle going to Sacramento. Maybe they have a different mindset and they'd be willing to trade away Steph Castle, but to me, I'd want to hold on to those two guys and move forward with whatever the Fox trade is without them. And if it doesn't happen, I'm okay waiting on this. Obviously, Fox wants to get moved before the deadline. The Kings presumably would like to get the deal done before the deadline, but they don't necessarily have to. They still have him under contract going into the 2025 offseason. And at that point, maybe things change for San Antonio. They're willing to give up more stuff, or Fox opens up his wish list of teams a little bit further at that point, the 2025 offseason, when they still have a year with Fox under contract. Now, That doesn't necessarily mean that the Spurs are the only team. I've definitely seen some reporting about Houston potentially being involved, although there's some other reporting saying that they're more likely to just hold on to their current core and continue to develop. Brooklyn is a team that I mentioned yesterday in the video, and that also has been thrown around in some reports today as a possible dark horse given some of their Kings connections there. That's definitely still an option, but the Spurs are at the top of the list. Again, though, there's no guarantee that this happens. This isn't Luka Doncic. This isn't Giannis Antetokounmpo. It's not a true MVP caliber player being offered up to go to San Antonio. This is not a, I'm going to do everything I can to add this guy to my roster kind of player. And De'Aaron Fox, despite the fact that he's very good and I personally think would be an awesome fit, this isn't a situation where the Spurs need to be desperate to add somebody. They presumably are going to be at the top of the list for a lot of guys. But it's a very interesting situation because typically we've got bigger market teams in play. We've got multiple teams in play, but Fox is in a unique situation here to be able to force himself specifically to a team that a year and a half ago, you would not have thought that players would want to push themselves to. In terms of my own personal prediction, I'm thinking that it's going to be a structure similar to what I mentioned earlier with draft picks and contracts. No Vassell, no Steph Castle, and I think it's going to happen within the next 5 or 6 days prior to the trade deadline. There's no real reason for this information to get leaked without the expectation that he's going to get moved, because if you're De'Aaron Fox's agency, Clutch, you're thinking, okay, we don't want to make things awkward for our guy in Sacramento, so why would we leak something if we didn't think it was going to happen? And then the Kings wouldn't let this get out if they didn't actually have real interest in trading away De'Aaron Fox. And then beyond that, we could be looking at a potential fire sale in Sacramento because De'Aaron Fox is the young core piece that they have there. Other than that, it's Malik Monk, it's DeMar DeRozan, it's Domantas Sabonis, like a little bit of Keegan Murray, but the core foundational piece in Sacramento, the guy they tried to get signed to an extension a couple of months ago, is and always will be De'Aaron Fox. Once that guy is gone, I wouldn't be surprised if like Domantas Sabonis is suddenly a trade option moving forward. DeMar DeRozan is a trade option. Some other guys for the Kings as well. This is going to create a potential domino effect regardless of where De'Aaron Fox goes. I still think it's going to be the Spurs, but I definitely would keep an eye on some of these other teams. If Houston potentially changes their mind on a couple of things, despite the fact that their contracts are a little weird. If Jalen Green or Alperen Şengün were available for trade right now, they're not because they just signed extensions this past offseason. I think Houston would be a little bit more of an option, but it gets more complicated when those guys are not available. And then Brooklyn, I think, is certainly still an option, but again, it's a little bit complicated for them because they're actively trying to lose games. And even though we're over halfway through the season, adding De'Aaron Fox to your team certainly would hurt your lottery odds. And so even though Brooklyn, I think, certainly would be an option in 2026 free agency, if it got that far for De'Aaron Fox, I think that they are probably not going to make this move now unless things fall apart with San Antonio. It's a unique situation. It's a very cool situation. Unless you're a Kings fan, it's unfortunate, but they should be able to get some really nice assets in exchange for Fox and move forward with some kind of clarity that they have not had ever since he decided not to sign the extension a couple of months ago. So right now, that's where we're at. It looks like De'Aaron Fox to the Spurs is very, very likely before the trade deadline, which is a week from tomorrow, unless something changes pretty dramatically.